the blood of Jesus. It's nothing but the blood of my Jesus.
Rubber boat training started. Everybody had to be a first-class swimmer. I wasn't quite there yet, so I spent about 6 Saturdays in a row all day long until I got myself upgraded to a first-class swimmer. And probably about a fourth of our battalion got transferred because they couldn't swim well enough to do the things that was required to do. And I'll tell you what, on a 90-degree day, handling a 7-man rubber boat, shoulder high, walking or jogging in the sand, very interesting day, so to say the least. So while I was in that battalion too, I also had a chance to go all the way up to the northern part of California to the Mountain Warfare Training Center, where we learned to do different kind of patrolling and stuff like that. And one thing there again, I learned how to rappel. And also I learned right then and there that I was chicken when it comes to heights. But I accomplished it and was able to move on and stuck around with that battalion for my whole first enlistment. So I eventually re-enlisted, went up the road back up in California for about another 70 or 80 miles to the Marine Corps Air Station El Toro, and reported in there. And because I had a secret clearance, they told me I could work in the Classified Material Control Center because the clerk that was there was getting ready to leave. So we had a turnover time. So the clerk was there. He took me down to the CMCC to introduce me to new boss. What a shock that was. I came from an all-man first reconnaissance unit, Gungy, to the word go, and I walked in that office, and there sat a very, very attractive female captain. I was almost shocked, but anyway, went to work for her, and she sure had an effect on my vocabulary, I'll tell you that. So anyway, got to respect her very much. Fine officer, fine lady, and here's one of those little things I wanted to share with you there. Just the two of us in this office, and all we did is just work with us all this secret material and all that. So anyway, way back then, we used to get paid in hard checks. And so first couple paydays, I just took my check, went home, had it cashed somewhere else. But there was one pay period, got my check, and wasn't a whole lot going on, so I asked her if I could go to the bank and cash my check. So she told me I could. And I did that about twice. And then another time, right after that, payday, had my check, asked her if I could go, and she was working on a report that she had to do, and very busy. She said, would you mind taking my check and cashing it too? At that time, all you needed to do is take somebody's ID card and your check and cash it. So I did that once or twice. And then after that, it's hard to believe, I won't go into all that details, but anyway, I would take her check, my check and her check, go to the bank, and she let me use her car. Now here I am, an enlisted person driving an officer's car, and I said, what if somebody stops me? She said, just tell them to call me, I'll take care of it. So anyway, take her car to the bank, cash her check, take her car to the gas station, fill it up with gas, and go to the post office and buy 3 money orders for her to pay her bills with. When I left there, I made meritorious sergeant. So anyway, that was a good tour of duty. So right about then, I got orders to go seagoing. And where's the young man that he met him a while ago, and I told him, thanks for the ride. Anyway, and that, I mean that sincerely now. When I left working for that Marine officer, I went aboard the USS El Dorado, an AGC-11, which is Amphibious Group Command, and was home ported out of 32nd Street Naval Station in San Diego, and went aboard. And there again, thanks for the ride, and I mean that sincerely. There again, thinking about way back when I said I'd never get over the state line and all that, I had no idea that I was going to get to go to the places that I did. went on 2 8-month deployments on that ship, and our home port overseas was Subic Bay in the Philippines. And so spent a lot of time in the Philippines. Got to go to Manila and had a tour of the Fernando Marques's and what was her name? Imelda, I think was her name, and all her shoes at the Presidential Palace. Anyway, going overseas, and back, got to stop in Hawaii 3 times, went to Bangkok twice, Okinawa several times, went to Kaohsiung, Taiwan, went to Vietnam about 4 or 5 times. Now, I want to share this with you, seeing how you're public taxpayers and all that. I often wondered about this. I don't know whether somebody particularly planned this or not, but to draw combat pay, you had to be in a combat zone for 6 days. That way you got a month's combat pay. It seemed like the ship would always go into that combat zone on the last 6 days of this month and the first 6 days of the second month. We were there 12 days and we got 2 months combat pay. We did that on both deployments over. And also being in that combat zone for 6 days, we got the same ribbons that the guys living in foxholes out in the jungle and all that got. Anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. Myself and my CO of our Marine Detachment aboard the ship, and a Navy doctor and a dentist, and some corpsmen and some of our other Marines in our detachment, we did get to go on a medical patrol. We went into some little village, and the doctors and dentists did their whole work. As a Marine there, I helped wash wounds and just clean up little babies and all that, so that the doctor and all that could tend to them. One thing I liked that stuck in my mind, the dentist, about the last 6 people he worked on, he pulled their teeth, no Novocaine whatsoever, and those people sat there in a chair and didn't say a word. And one of them, the dentist said, "Hey guys, come here, take a look at this." Some little old lady, every tooth in her head was gold. I guess that was her bank deposit right there that she kept, because there again, they had no idea whether they were going to be overrun the next day or not. So they had to keep their money where they could not let it be found or whatever. So anyway, another little highlight of that ship, we went to Yokosuka, Japan once, and one of the Marines in the detachment, when he was in high school, he had a girl that was a foreign exchange student, was there for the school for about a year. And she told him that if he ever got to come to Japan, to let her know, and she would invite him to come to her house, or her parents' house and all that. And so we went on that deployment, and Mike let her know, and she told him he could come and invite a couple of friends. Well, I was one of his friends. So we rode a train from Yokosuka to Tokyo. The family picked us up, and we went to their house, and I mean, it was totally, definitely Japanese, sliding doors and all that, eating with chopsticks and all that. You know, and what really impressed me, sitting on the couch with her father, talk about this, a Japanese father, show him his album of World War II. He was a mechanic that worked on the Japanese Zeros. I thought, boy, honey, here I am, an American, sitting here with the Japanese looking at his war photos. I thought that was kind of neat. Also, on the ship, too, we got to spend a week in San Francisco, and we got to spend a week in Seattle, Washington. Got to go up in that Space Needle there at Seattle, Washington. But that was a good tour of duty. So once again, I'd like to pass that on to that man about a good ride. So left there, had to fly back to the United States. They changed my MOS. Like I said, I was an admin clerk. The Marine Corps was short of people working in the intelligence field and logistics field. I got picked to serve in the intelligence field. And so there again, my secret clearance was upgraded to a top secret clearance. I went to Little Creek, Virginia for training there, and finally got our formal MOS, Military Occupational Specialty, at Fort Hollywood, Maryland. And this is a little side effect here. While I was going to school there, I met, Tanya has a cousin, and her husband was going to intelligence school at the same time. I met him, got to be friends. Anyway, just hold that thought. So once again, went to once I got out of school, went back and started working in the Wing G2, worked there for a while, and then they transferred me to 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines, where I was the intelligence chief and had 12 scouts working for me. And we all worked for a very incompetent lieutenant, and sure glad when I finally got orders left there. But anyway, before then, we went out on a Caribbean cruise. We got to go to Vieques Island, home, armpit of the world, but there's some people that like it. We got to pull Liberty in San Juan. And then, thank goodness, praise the Lord, I got orders to Vietnam. You got to get out of that 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines, get away from that lieutenant. So anyway, went to Vietnam. And when we landed there, the airfield was under rocket attack, but that didn't last long. We all got into our sleeping quarters that night, and the next day they just took us out and assigned us to where we were going to work. There again, praise the Lord, I assumed that I was going to go to one of the infantry battalions and be one of the S2 chiefs, but there again, because I had a top secret clearance and all that, I got assigned to the second highest headquarters in Vietnam. It was the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force, and our commanding officer there was a 3-star general. So I went to work in the order of battle section, where we spent, just day after day after day reading all kind of classified material. And I started out as an analyst, had a big map. All I did was plotting enemy positions on the map and stuff like that. And one of the highlights there, right down this, we were in a big metal building, and there was a section called the Arc-Light section. They were the people that B-52 bombers. They always had their own targets. But I could not believe one afternoon a gunnery sergeant walked in and said, "We've taken care of all of our targets. Do you all have any targets you would like for us to look at?" So me and this young sergeant that was working together said, "Yeah, we got one." And so we give them the coordinates, and sure enough, they made a strike. And although I never was out in the bush, I carried a weapon everywhere I went, but never got to use it one time. But the B-52 strike was very successful. So that was one thing I felt like we accomplished there. Later on, an Army, 24 Corps, come in, took our positions, and we moved to a place called Red Beach, where things slowed down fairly well. And seeing how it was slow, we were all eligible for R&R, so I took R&R to Sydney, Australia. And I know we've seen it on TV, that one thing that they always show, it's the opera hall. It looks like the clamshell things. I saw that when the very first thing was built, and the very first clamshell was set up there. And then later on, once again, things not too exciting. So me and another guy, we took leave and went to Osaka, Japan, and for the 1970 World's Fair. We attended that. And then on the way back from Osaka to Tokyo, where we could catch our flight back to Vietnam, we got to ride that famous bullet train. And I'll tell you what, it's appropriately named. That thing moved right on down the road. And and while I was in Vietnam, remember once again I said I met Tanya's cousin's husband in Vietnam, and or intelligence school. Now he and I are working in the same section, in this intelligence section in Vietnam. So he decided that he didn't think I was getting enough mail, which I wasn't, and he said, "My wife has a cousin that would like to write to a Marine in Vietnam." So I give him my address, and my running mate right there started writing me. She wrote me every day while I was in Vietnam. We numbered our letters, and and she sent me leaves when the leaves changed colors and all that. Sent me peanut butter fudge, and something that really started a thing. She sent me some roots from sassafras tree, and I was able to boil some sassafras tea, and I got to be a pretty popular guy around here. And nobody had ever drank sassafras tea before, and so that went over real well. Anyway, got orders from Vietnam, and was transferred to Cherry Point, North Carolina, where I went to work in the Wing G2, and there again, me and Tanya's cousin's husband showed up there, and it was kind of surprising too. old master gunnery sergeant I was working for, I had to ask him for an afternoon off one day, and he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to West Virginia to visit this young lady that has caught my attention." And so from then on, for the time, I was only stationed there for about less than a year. But sometimes on Friday afternoon, if we weren't doing nothing, old master, he was smoking a pipe, said, "Imagine if you left here about now, you could probably be in West Virginia by dark, couldn't you?" So I told me, I just picked up my cover and walked out and headed to West Virginia. And so at the end of that tour of duty, I asked Tanya to marry me. So, and lo and behold, we'd only been married less than a year. I got orders to DI school at Paris Island. Boy, what a experience that was. And once again, her husband's husband, he got orders before I did. And we were talking, he was married and had five boys. I think, my goodness, how's he going to do that with those 5 boys and all that? So I went over to his house several times, helped him get uniforms ready and all that. And this is hard to believe, but on my birthday, walking down the hallway in the wing headquarters, the wing admin chief caught up with me and said, "Guess what? What? You got orders to DI school too." So in less than a month, we reported into Paris Island, South Carolina, to become a drill instructor. Had to go to school twice. Flunked out the first time. And boy, they called me in and showed me my fitness report, and boy, it was horrible. And they said, "We'll destroy this fitness report if you'll give it another try." Goodness. So I give it another try. And I made it through that time, was assigned to 3rd Battalion, and went ahead and started training recruits. And what an experience in my life that was. It just changed everything. I had never marched, been in the Marine Corps for over 10 years, and never really marched anybody anywhere. And here I was, got 80 to 90 recruits there, teaching them their left face from their right face. Something. I wish I had all day to tell you about some of the stories. It was just unreal. Some of it was sad to see some of them come and then go home because they couldn't make it through. But you know, to take, like say, 80 to 90 recruits that, you know, some of them didn't, like say, didn't hardly know their left hand from the right hand, couldn't chew gum and walk at the same time. But to take those and start out, and then 11 weeks later, walk across the parade deck with them, and then, like I say, at the final reviewing, have the parents come out to see them and all that. I've had parents walk right by their son because they didn't recognize him, because they changed in their appearance. You know, no more a slob walking around in their dress uniforms and all that. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and all that. And what a sense of pride that really was. So, anyway, getting close to the end here. Left the drill field, went to Okinawa, once again, 3rd Recon Battalion, and another, just like the 1st Recon Battalion, very gungy outfit. Went there, served 13 months there, cut this short. Went on one 30-day deployment, went to Pohang, Korea. I wish I had time to tell you about a story there, but I'm just going to skip over that. One thing I did do that really was an enjoyment, I got to be a safety rider for some parachutists. Whenever the guys in the battalion would make parachute jumps, they had to have a safety rider in case their static lines got hung up and all that. And so 3 of us riding in the little fuselage of an OV-10 aircraft. You know, I'd sit here, next guy sit right in between my legs, and then the third guy would sit right there. These legs dangling out that fuselage, he'd have a safety strap across. When we get to the drop zone, he'd unfasten that safety strap, and then the pilot or co-pilot through earphones would tell me to get ready to jump. And then once he would say jump, I'd pat the first guy in front of me on his shoulder. He would push the first guy out, then I would push him out. And once they are out, then that was my job to pull the static lines back in. And so that was an interesting there. During the daytime, I thought, my goodness, that wouldn't be a bad idea. I wouldn't mind jumping out myself. Of course, I'd have got myself in big trouble if I did that. But I got to do it at night, too. Night changed my whole reflection on that. Ain't no way. So that's a different story. So anyway, getting toward the end here, transferred from recon back to Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort. I was in 2 different squadrons, had an opportunity to go on 3 missile shoots to Arizona, and then right 3 months before I retired, we went on a 30-day deployment to Balıkesir, Turkey. And all this time, all this time I was in MCS Beaufort, we found First Christian Church, and we started going church there regular, and baptized on the 26th of October, 1976. And they had a program going on there. It was called Jesus and Me, JAM, where the kids would come together to learn things. Well, I probably didn't know any more than what those kids did. So to keep ahead of my kids, I was sitting right in the back of that class with my notebook, pencil and paper, taking notes. I knew Jesus, but didn't know a lot about him. So I sit there and listen to what the preacher was teaching those kids, trying to stay one step ahead of my kids. So anyway, so that's my military story. Not too bad for a kid that thought he would never get across the state line. And so now I'm serving as an elder in our church and also a trustee. I lead the adult Sunday school class, and I am chairman of the mission committee. Now why are you doing all that? Well, like I said, there's only 12 men in the class. I mean, our congregation, so it's when somebody's got to do it. So anyway, I believe being in this church for almost, it's coming up on 40 years. Some people have hopped around from church to church to church. But when Tanya and I arrived there, I said, I'm going to jump in with both feet and do what I can. There's been a time or two, I think we've had at least 5 splits in that church. And there was one time, myself and one of the other elders, we called a real estate agent to come and appraise the land. And they were going to put a for sale sign out front. And a preacher from Savannah named Lionel Marvel showed up on our doorstep and said, let's give it another try. And so he stayed with us for 13 years. And he finally left and went back to Savannah, where he's still preaching today. And right now we have a preacher with us named Jim Carlisle, and we're doing fairly well, but we're not growing. It just seems like as we look out over the congregation, all we see is gray hair and bald heads, and I'm getting close there myself. So. But, bringing that military stuff to an end here, the last thing I want to say, as far as the church is concerned, I believe more than ever that we need to pray. Amen. And I think we need definitely pray for our country. There's no doubt our country is in a little bit of trouble. It don't take much to turn on the TV and see what's going on. I know there's this thing about politics. I won't get into that. So I consider myself a right-wing conservative, and there's some things going on in this country that I definitely don't like. But see me afterwards if you want to talk about that. But talking about praying, I'd like to share something with you. Maybe somebody taught you this when you were a little bitty kid. I don't know, but a while back I delivered a sermon in our church, and there was a couple women there approached me afterwards, said that they didn't know anything about it either. Some people have difficulty praying, and that's a big concern. If you're a member of the church, you should be able to go to your Lord in prayer. Some people think it's got to be something flowery and all that. To me, talking to Jesus is just like talking to your spouse or your next door neighbor. So I'd like, and this one woman in particular said, that she had trouble when she started to pray, thinking about what to pray. So I just want to share a little 5-finger thing with you. Maybe you've already seen it. If you have, just bear with me for a couple minutes. So if you think you can't pray, think about it this way. Using your hand. Your thumb, the closest thing to you. Pray for your spouse. Your children, your grandchildren, whatever. Pray for those. Your pointing finger. Point to those people that pointed you to the church or to Christ, your preacher. Or maybe it was your uncle or grandparents that pointed you to the church. Pray for those. Your long finger. Pray for those people that are a long ways away. Maybe you got relatives that live on the other coast or whatever. Or how about missionaries in foreign countries, being persecuted all the time? Pray for missionaries. They need it. Your ring finger, that's usually considered your weak finger. Pray for those that are weak, like someone that's in a nursing home, or maybe somebody that has a medical disability of some sort and can't get around too well. So pray for those that we consider a weak individual. Then your little finger, the least of all, pray for yourself, for whatever your supplications may be. All right? I got one last thing I would like to share with you because it's Memorial Day. That's another thing I'm having a hard time with, getting old. I get very emotional. I have a poem here that I'd like to read, and this will end my time here. He was getting old and paunchy. His hair was falling fast. He sat around a legion telling stories of the past, of a war that he once fought in and the deeds that he had done, and his exploits with his buddies. They were heroes, every one. And though sometimes to his neighbors his tales became a joke, all his buddies listened quietly, for they knew whereof he spoke. But we'll hear his tales no longer, for old Joe passed away. And the world's a little poorer, for a veteran died today. He won't be mourned by many, just his children and his wife, for he lived an ordinary, very quiet sort of life. He held a job and raised a family, going quietly on his way, and the world won't note his passing, though a veteran died today. When politicians leave this earth, their bodies lie in state, while thousands note their passing and proclaim that they were great. Papers tell of their life stories from the time that they were young, but the passing of a veteran goes unnoticed and unsung. It's the greatest contribution to the welfare of our land, some jerk who breaks his promise and cons his fellow man, or the ordinary fellow who in times of war and strife goes off to serve his country and offers up his life. The politician's stipend and the style in which he lives are often disproportionate to the service that he gives, while the ordinary veteran who offered up his all is paid off with a medal and perhaps a pension small. It's not the politicians with their compromised employees who won for us the freedom that our country now enjoys. Should you find yourself in danger with your enemies at hand, would you really want some cop-out with his ever-waffling stand? Or would you want a veteran, his home, his country, his kin, just a common veteran who would fight until the end? He was just a common veteran, and his ranks are growing thin, but his presence should remind us we may need his likes again. For when countries are in conflict, we find the veteran's part is to clean up all the troubles that the politicians start. If we cannot do honor while he's here to hear the praise, then at least let's give him homage at the ending of his days. Perhaps just a simple headline in the paper that might say, "Our country is in mourning, a veteran died today." Thank you all.